something we've always said is culture change being really important. What kind of evidence have you managed to get that this kind of training is being carried out and it is actually making a difference?
Well, it's fair to say it's still very early days, and so the number of families that have gone through the EHC assessment process is still quite small as against the whole numbers that we know will be taking place in the next 3 years. But what I am encouraged by is some of the feedback that we've had from the SEN advisors and also from some of the parent carer forums, which suggests that the relationship between parents and the professionals is starting to shift. Now, that's still a small level of evidence, and we won't be satisfied until we see that happening right across the board. That's the point when we know there really has been the culture change that we're all looking for. And there will still be circumstances that we come across where local authorities just haven't quite got it yet. They haven't understood what it is that's required, which is why we've continued to work with the SEN advisors, with those local authorities, to make sure that not just that they're legally compliant, but they're actually starting to change the way that they engage with parents so that it's on a much more level footing and it's seen as a joint enterprise or co-production rather than simply them telling families what they're going to do.
Is there a training programme for a nationally approved training programme for culture change?
Well, I'm not sure you can sort of train culture change in that sense. I think what you need to do... and
something has to be, introduced to make that shift.
Yeah, but what we have seen through the piloting of the new reforms is where you, both through the changes in the law, but also with the different approach to co-production, for example, that has helped engender a different type of relationship. So I remember one parent telling me it was a breath of fresh air that for the first time ever I sat in a room and there was someone from health, someone from education, someone from social care there who were actually asking me questions about what we wanted as a family, what I wanted for my child, rather than telling us this is what we're going to provide for you. For me, that's the acid test. We are training SENCOs and we are working with the NCTL to try and ensure that their initial teacher training is more reflective of the new reforms. But ultimately, it's got to be an attitudinal change. And an understanding that actually if we do this differently, but in a collective way, then that's going to have the impact that we all want to see.
Obviously it doesn't always go right, as you well recognise. We've been aware of some local authorities who are making up their own policies which aren't perhaps legal. So how can parents be assured that what they're being told by their local authority is actually the truth?
Well, first of all, the law is as clear as it could be about what is expected of local authorities. So the first thing to do, and I recognise it's a big document and it's not as accessible to everybody as it might be, but the Code of Practice does make it crystal clear what it is that local authorities should or shouldn't be doing. And so if you're in any doubt, then you can refer to that. If that doesn't help you solve that riddle, then the work of the independent supporters and the contact of family and the parent carer forums, as well as the helplines, all that information available to you will help you decipher whether the local authority is compliant or not. Now, we are aware of some local authorities that have set off on the wrong track, and that's why we've continued to monitor closely every local authority to satisfy ourselves that they're not starting to create a system which is unrepresentative of the new reforms.
And the key figures within those local authorities, have they received training or will they receive ongoing training to help them perhaps take on board the Code of Practice in the way that they should be?
Well, it's a matter for each local authority as to what training they offer their officers. But what we are starting to see, and I've been to a number of conferences around the country where there's been an open invitation for local authorities to learn about how they can recalibrate their whole attitude towards SEN, not just within the local authority but also with their relationship with health and with their schools, so that they do start to instill that very different approach. And where there are opportunities to take up that training, I would encourage every local authority to do so, but at every level, not just with all the practitioners who are working directly with families, but also those who are making the strategic decisions at the higher end of local authorities. One of the first things I did to try and ensure that this was happening, not just top down but bottom up within local authorities, is to meet with chief executives from councils, as well as many of the senior managers within health, and explain to them the importance of doing this. It's in the NHS mandate, there's new law which you have to comply with, but you also need to make sure that your staff know what is required of them, and that's where training is key.